Near the heart of Sparrow Island, David and Tyler, who were 17 years old, were in their beds just before the alarm was about to go off. "Get up! Get up!" An alarm sound on David and Tyler's phones. David and Tyler both pick up their phones and sync. They pull off their covers and they sit up straight. David says this while yawning and rubbing his eyelids. "What day is it?" "It's September 15th, David says in a serious voice. At different times, they both say, "Happy birthday, Sunny and River," though Tyler says it more enthusiastically. "Happy birthday, Sunny and River," he says. Sunny and River were friends of theirs and were having a slumber party for their birthday that David, Tyler, and their grandparents were attending that day. Then Tyler opened up their window, grabbed a bullhorn from underneath his bed, turned it on, and yelled as loudly as he could through the bullhorn, "Happy birthday!" After the neighbor said, "Good morning, Tyler." David then looked at the doorway to their bedroom, which was opened, while Tyler closed the windows. Tyler said, "I'm gonna be the first one in the restroom," throwing his blanket on David. "Ha ha," he laughed. David sighed, then pulled the blanket off. Then he looked at his phone, which was conveniently on his bedside table, and he saw a text from one of his friends. What? Oh, it's probably just for the party. But usually nobody is up this early. Unless it's Emily, of course, duh. It was Taylor who said that Lisa's boyfriend died in a car accident. What? Today of all the days, he said. Of course, this is... Maybe Sunny and River were right. Their birthday is cursed. David then thought to text Lisa, but thought better of it because he figured it would be better to say something in person. A light shined on David's face, which was the light from the bathroom. Tyler had opened the door and was heading across to the hallway, into their doorway, and into the room. Due to some previous medical conditions, the door was taken off so that if needed, people could get through quickly. With a smirk, Tyler walked into the room and spinned around, then said, "What do you think?" David then looked up to see what his brother chose to wear. Tyler had white hair that was shaved on the sides and was wearing a pair of blue pajamas with pictures of his favorite superheroes, the Transport Children. David stood up and said, "Blake was in a car accident. And he didn't make it." Tyler's face turned to a frown. David then said, "The twins' party," he said, as he exhaled slowly. "You know Lisa won't want to ruin Sunny and River's party, especially after all the things that have happened to them in the past. And won't talk about it at the party, so she probably won't want us to say anything either." Tyler agreed, then looked at a small caddy filled with medical supplies. Tyler then said, "Well, we have to get our wraps changed out while sliding the caddy over and cleaning his hands with a sanitizer. And then Tyler begins opening bags for his wrapping. Tyler and David both had suffered various medical conditions, including various types of tumors, heart conditions, and are on the mend from a surgery in their abdomen area. Tyler put up a rod and a curtain with a tree design on hooks that were in the doorway. The reason they had no door was because they were doing a experimental advanced chemotherapy treatment that caused epileptic type symptoms that cause a lot of pain and can also be stopped by shots in the arm. The treatment was called the car ray treatment. Tyler proceeded to unwrap his wrapping and add new wrapping to his lower right abdomen area, where he had a scar from a procedure he recently had to drain. David also had the same procedure done in a different spot on his back, which led to him having a much more padded bed. After Tyler was done, he put the curtain rod back down and left the room. As David was coming in, he was wearing pajamas that he designed himself, and Sunny, who owned a fabric and fashion store, made. Tyler, now in the hallway, turned around to see all the pictures on the hallway, remembering when they were taken. He put one of his fingers on the underside of each picture, sliding it across as he walked down the hallway. One of them catched his eye. A picture of Tyler's mom, Bella, in the hospital just after giving birth to him and David, with two of their closest friends, Eleanor and Cheng. To either side of the hospital bed, on the hospital bed, was Cody, their sister, and their father, Ethan, just to the right of her. He then said, "God, could you say good morning and good morning, Mom and Dad?" and walked away into the living room where his grandma and grandpa were drinking tea. They both said, "Good morning, Tyler." David was just behind him, and they said, "Good morning, David," as well. The twins said, "Good morning, Grandma," and "Good morning, Grandpa." Their grandma reminded them to say good morning to each other. They both said good morning. Tyler then went into the kitchen and grabbed an oatmeal bar, and then they headed to the front door, which was on the other side of the living room. As the twins were both walking in the direction of the front door, they were about to open up the door when Grandma said, "Where do you think you two are going?" while simultaneously getting up, followed by their grandpa. The twins turned around to see the two of them looking at them with serious faces. Tyler was trying to make an excuse when Grandma said, "I don't want to hear anything until you get some food inside you." David made a face of, "Well, it was a good try." Then he sighed and said, "Yeah, Grandma's right." Then Grandpa chuckled and said, "Yep, she's always right." Then Grandma responded, "I don't know about that, but I do know how to make a good meal." Then she had them set the table. There was enough time for them to eat breakfast before going to the Brookshire Museum to work. Grandma didn't make too much food for them because they were going to go to a slumber party at the Brookshire Museum. And Grandma actually was the person making the cake for the party and the cupcakes for their party, though Grandpa did help as much as he could with the baking. Grandma was the head of the operation, and David and Tyler were going to be taking it over on the city bus. Grandma and Grandpa were going to take a large amount of cupcakes, each decorated in a different way. and take them to the museum in their car after she was done decorating them. Decorating and baking are her specialties. After breakfast and cleanup, the boys went outside wearing masks because their immune systems weren't that strong. The bus driver took this into consideration and cleaned the bus before they got there. Tyler and David carefully maneuvered in through the bus doors. The bus driver helped them by directing, and Pepper, their friend, grabbed their medical bag and their on-the-go kids from inside the house. Tyler walked up the stairs to the bus, walking backwards, holding the cake, which it was, in fact, a very tall cake on the bus. They walked all the way down the walkway of the bus and sat it down on the back seat of the bus. They sat the cake right next to Lisa in the back seat of the bus, as planned out by them. More Emily, their friend, while they were planning the slumber party. Lisa held on to the cake box while Tyler and David got into their seats. David sat on the other side of the cake, and Tyler sat on the bench in front of David and Lisa. He was across from Pepper, who is another of their friends. They began to chatter. Back at their house, their grandma and grandpa were loading the last few trays of cupcakes into boxes and setting them in the refrigerator. They later began walking down the hallway to go get their PJs for the party. Holding hands, Ellie, aka Grandma, let go of Mark's hand, aka Grandpa. Grabbed a photo Tyler was looking at earlier, the same one that he stopped and prayed to the Lord to ask him to say good morning and good night every morning and every night to their parents. Mark then grabbed her shoulders, leaned her in for a hug, and said in a calm, whispered voice, "I know it's going to be hard without them around." She then turned around and, in a concerned and slightly annoyed tone, "What if they don't eat enough? You saw what they were trying to eat for breakfast, Mark." Then Mark said, "I know, Ellie, it's going to be hard, but they can do it." Ellie said, "It's just that they've been through so much, and I don't want them to get hurt. It's all too much for my heart to handle." First, we saw our son leave the house and get married to Bella, which was a joyful experience for both them and us. And then they told us about Cody, and she was born. And then 3 years later, David and Tyler. Then they were born, and because of Tyler and David's consistent appointments and surgeries, we stayed at their house to help with Cody for a little while. They were in the NICU for 3 months, then they were barely the size of my arm. And we almost lost them 5 times. They had big holes in their hearts that had to heal over time, and in fact they did. But then when they were 2, tumors slowly showed up all over them. On top of that, they had cancer. Then Ellie turned to the other side of the hallway, where a bunch of news report clippings and pages were framed on the wall. Ellie then said, then on that one day, they were at their apartment. Even though she only knew what stories were told to her, this is what happened. That day, Bella was cooking lunch. Cody, who was 8 at the time, was at school, and the twins, who were 5, were at the time were sitting in the living room playing with their dinosaur toys. Ethan was taking a nap after his night shift as the hospital janitor and his morning shift at Eleanor and Chang's restaurant. Bella realized that they were out of shredded cheese, and she was making an old family recipe for quesadillas. So she turned the gas oven off, put a lid on the skillet, that had a bit of oil in it and slid the skillet onto the counter. She told the twins that she was going to run to the store and that Daddy was just in the other room if they needed him. She then opened the door to her and Ethan's room, and she pulled her purse off of a hook that was just on the other side of the door. She left the bedroom door open because it had gotten stuck before. Even though she was only going to be gone for 3 minutes, it was better to just not risk it. She then went down the hallway to the living room and out the door. After saying goodbye, the store was only one building away, so she just walked there. On the table, there was a bag of marshmallows. David saw them and said to Tyler, "Hey, what if we make s'mores and then surprise Mommy and Daddy and Cody with them?" Tyler agreed by saying, "Yeah, but how are we going to do that?" David said, "Just like we always do with the stove. I will just take the metal guard off of the top of the oven so that it will be just like a fire." Tyler said, "But Mommy said we're not supposed to do that without her and Daddy around. But it will be a surprise for their anniversary." David said, forgetting the part of the word which was anniversary. "Remember Daddy said they both get presents for the anniversary." David then dropped his dinosaurs and walked over to the table. Tyler dropped his dinosaurs and followed him. David said, "You get the skewers and I'll get the marshmallows." Tyler walked over to the pantry and David grabbed the marshmallows off of the top of the table, then put them on a dining room chair, then slid the chair to the counter. He put the marshmallows on the counter while Tyler grabbed the skewers out of the pantry, which was right next to the counter that was in between the oven and the pantry. Tyler put the skewers on the counter next to the pantry. David then said, "Wait, what if Daddy sees this? I'll go shut the door," said Tyler. While Tyler was shutting the door, David got some graham crackers on a plate, carefully counting them, each for each person in the family. He then climbed up on the counter to the left of the oven and began opening the marshmallow bag by pushing a skewer through the plastic bag and then putting his finger in the hole the skewer made, just like his dad had done several times before. Then David grabbed a marshmallow and ate it with an embarrassed look as he remembered that it wasn't nice to eat without everybody else. While this was happening, Tyler was pushing a chair to the other side of the oven. He then climbed up the chair and on the counter. David then said, "We got to get the guard off." And Tyler said, "How do we do that?" David said, "We'll just pull it until it falls on the floor." Then they both, on either side of the oven, picked up the guard, which was made of metal and was so heavy that Ethan and Bella had to pick it up together when they did it in the past. David and Tyler then began to slide the guard until it fell off the oven. In their parents' room where their dad was sleeping, he had a dream about a bright light grabbing his left foot and flipping him off the bed. Then, at the sound of the metal guard hitting the ground, Ethan immediately woke up and flipped off the bed. He then got up and assumed a martial arts position he had learned from Chang, with the right side of him facing the door. During this time, David and Tyler both heard their dad fall out of bed and get up. David said, "We have to hurry! He's going to open up the door." Ethan heard that and immediately reached for the door, assuming there would be trouble on the other side. David and Tyler heard him grabbing the door handle, so they grabbed all 6 marshmallows, 5 for the family members and 1 extra as they usually did, and put them near the fire so that all of them would cook at the same time. Tyler and David couldn't handle holding all 3 of them at once because the marshmallows were actually bigger than their hands. They were too heavy. David let go of one and then 2, literally dropping all 3 of them as they flipped out of his hands. All 6 of them were in the fire. David started yelling, "Pick them up!" Then Ethan said in the other room, "Whatever you boys are up to." He then stopped, noticing the door was stuck. Again. "What are you boys up to? It sounds like the oven's on. You need to turn it off if Mommy's not here," he said in a concerned, stressed voice. In the kitchen, David and Tyler had picked up the skewers, but all the marshmallows were on fire. David noticed the pan of oil and then remembered a firefighter that came to the children's hospital that they visited often for treatment. He had said that fire doesn't work when there's no air, and told Tyler, "Put all the marshmallows inside the skillet and put the lid on them so it stops burning." But instead, when one marshmallow hit the oil, it burst into flames, hitting the cabinet above it like a rocket of fire. David said, "Oh no," and then tried to turn off the stove, but then he fell off the counter headfirst instead. Tyler was scared and then jumped off the counter into the chair he climbed up on earlier. Ethan could smell the fire and began busting down the door by kicking it. This scared Tyler and he ran over to David, who was knocked out. Then he ran over to his dinosaurs and sat on his knees and began to call out, "Mommy!" while crying. Ethan said, "Don't worry, Tyler, Daddy's coming. Stay away from my door, son, okay?" Ethan remembered a pair of metal ice skates that were in his closet he hadn't worn in years. Then he digged through the closet and grabbed them quickly, took the guard off, and started banging them against the door. While this was happening, the fire had spread to a 3rd cabinet that was on the same wall as the 2 cabinets that first lighted on fire. Tyler opened his eyes to see David right next to him. He was overcome with an emotion of confusion and guilt, because how did David get to him without being awake? And guilty because he didn't save David from the fire like the firefighters. He was terrified by seeing an entire wall covered in fire. And then the front door opened. His mom, who saw the flames, grabbed David and told Tyler to go out the door. Thankfully, they had trained for this, so Tyler knew exactly what to do. The neighbors, an elderly couple from across the hall, saw this and called 911 while setting off the fire alarm. Bella gave David to the neighbor's husband, and Tyler and the neighbor walked down the stairs as she carefully guided her husband down the stairs while he was holding David. Meanwhile, Bella raced back into the apartment to help Ethan out. She stood at the door and began to walk over, disregarding all the instructions she had given David and Tyler about leaving the house and not coming back. When Ethan walked out of the smoke, he then collapsed out of pure exhaustion of breaking the door down and the smoke. More neighbors who were coming down the stairs helped him get downstairs. The apartment building was completely evacuated, and the 2 buildings on the either side of it. The firefighters and the paramedics got there, tended to David and Ethan, and put out the flames. After the fire was put out, everyone outside looked at their destroyed homes. Everyone was angry at David and Tyler, but all things considered, they didn't stay mad for very long, and they were only 5. The police ranted to the owner of the building, saying that you should have performed the proper safety inspections to make sure that the building was safe to live in, because it shouldn't have gone up in flames like that. And then that the walls and the internal structures were very flammable and dangerous. No one should even be living in this building, they said. The firefighters blocked off all the entrances to the building, and the chief firefighter had a talk with the twins about the dangers of fire. It was about how dangerous fire was, and that they should never be around fire without adult supervision again. And then the neighbors made plans to stay other places, but Bella and Ethan had to figure out where to go. They talked to both Bella and Ethan's parents, and Bella's parents were painting the walls and ceilings of a hallway in an art museum in England, along with their 5 other kids: Antonio, Bruno, Rosa, Mary, and Van. His name was inspired by their favorite artist. Bella is the second oldest. Ethan's parents insisted they come to live